The topic is, how do you get an addict to go to rehab? A lot of people rely on rehab as a solution for their addict loved one, for their addict friend, or for their addict, acquaintance that they may meet. A lot of times, addicts will help each other. Addicts will help each other get into rehab. The ones who are sober for a little while, or the ones who are sober for a long time, or the ones who are completely recovered. They'll reach back and they'll help. Family members, a lot of times, they are the ones who help the most, and they're the ones who can do the most. It's true. But they're the ones also sometimes who are the least equipped, or the least knowledgeable to help an addict to get to rehab. It's not easy to get them to want to go to rehab when they don't want to go. But when people may say, you can't help somebody until they're ready to go, until they're ready to stop using, I'm not a believer in that. I think that's a crock of shit. And I think that's a cop-out, chicken shit way to approach trying to help somebody. Because it's an excuse that an addict who uses is the one that they'll use to go ahead and tell anybody who wants to talk about recovery or talk about sobriety. It's a way to deflect any conversation like that. Any conversation like that is a good conversation that an addict in active addiction can have. You make it difficult as the addict who says, I'm not ready, right? Well, you might not be ready at that moment, but that doesn't mean you're not ready at all. It just means that you're not going that day because you still want to get high. That's it, right? I'm not ready. That to me, that's the dumbest shit to hear people say, even though smart people say it, and friends of mine have said it, and I love those friends who say who said it, but I disagree. Addicts are a lot of times, they don't have a choice. They're forced to go into recovery. They're forced to go into rehab. They're forced to go into programs. And it happens all the time. All the time. They're not ready to go. I don't know, most addicts are not ready to go and to get into a program. But when an addict tells you, when they wizard wise you with their wisdom, which they have wisdom, they're active addiction. Their wisdom is skewed. Their wisdom is like, here's the wise path, and they're like over here into the lunatic path. And and it's good to care about them. It's right to care about them because they're people, and they're somebody's brothers, sisters. They're someone's loved one. Somebody loves them. But the people that love them are the people that don't approach them a lot of times, and they don't know what to do. It's difficult to have a conversation with someone you love who is high and who is tripping out or who is just not all there, because you don't see them. You see somebody else. Is what you see, and you don't recognize them, and you miss the person that you love that's not there because you're like, they're not. That's not you. That's not them, and it can hurt. It can hurt to have a repeated exposure to that alien addict person that's a little bit high or just not all there or mentally unstable or just miserable, because addict life is a miserable existence. Addicts complain all the time. That's their number one love of life to do is complain. But they complain for reasons that are real too. It's real to them because they're real reasons too. But sometimes they complain in excess too, because the world is not an evil place. The world is not a bad place. The world is just not something that's always out to get them. You make bad choices, and the bad choices you make bring you more bad, is what ultimately happens. You make miserable choices and make you miserable. It's hard to make good choices, and good choices are basically a one simple direction good choice. It's get out of addiction. That's it. Any conversation you can have with an addict that talks about recovery, that talks about sobriety, that talks about it, it's a difficult conversation to have. It's hard to talk to somebody that you care about, that you're trying to keep in your life about recovery, about sobriety, because they can pull away from you, and then you lose the chance to talk to them. If you're someone who's sober, been an addict, or sober, gone through recovery, or somebody who is being sober, trying to be sober, and you're there for a friend, or you're a family member who's being there for someone that you love, when you talk to them and you talk about sobriety, and they go, I don't want to talk about it. I want to talk about it. And that you haven't seen them for a while, or you're doing something that's not really drug related if you're not an addict. But it's difficult to throw that away or give that away, to have them in your presence, because once you start to talk about things that they don't want to hear, because it doesn't work in line with what they want to do, which is to get high still. And it isn't always a want. Want is a real word to use for addicts, the way that they want to get high. Want to get high. They do. And addicts need to get high. Some addicts just have to get high. Addicts just going to get high. An addict is like, what are you going to do today? Drugs. What are you going to do today? Get high. What are you going to do today? Look for money for drugs. It's trite for some people to think about. That's their existence. But the thing about addicts who don't have anything and who have to hustle, right, is that if you were to look at in between the high and look at what they do, a lot of times you'll see someone that's fastidious and hardworking, because they're hardworking to figure out how to get money. Those elements of hard work and being able to solve problems and to find solutions is still there. They have to do it every day. They're survivors, is what they are, especially if they're on the street with nothing. An addict with no money is a survivor. He's trying to figure out how to get by, how to pay bills if they're lucky enough to still have bills, or lucky enough to still have a house. They're and if they're still wanting to be an addict, you're not going to keep it. You're not going to keep anything that you have of value. Unless you're a functioning addict, and those exist, but those are rare as far as I'm concerned. And those are not good role models as far as I'm concerned. You don't want to have a friend who's a badass, wise Yoda master of being high and functioning, or doing his work and getting by and paying bills and providing for a family. You don't want them as a role model. You don't want them as a role model at all. Right? If they're a good person, they're a good person outside of that. It's true. They can be a good person. But if they start to share with you how they succeed in being someone who gets high, gets by, then you don't want to be someone who's in their circle of influence at all. Because they're strong people. It's probably true. It's true. They're strong people, capable people. It's true. They haven't succumbed to what could be a lifetime addiction that they've had. They've figured out a way to manage it. But they are far less human beings than what they could be, and they don't believe that, is what more than likely you'll hear them say if ever asked that question. They'll think that they're fine. They'll think that they're functioning good. The reality of them being far less a success or far less someone capable at what they do. They could be highly skilled at something, but without drugs and more love of life, they would exceed that skill. And if they say they love life, then I've never heard that shit. I mean, maybe I've heard that shit, but it's like, you can't love life if you're an addict. I mean, if you're a drug abuser of hardcore drugs simply for the purpose of just getting high and getting stupid and getting, doing it to excess. Medication for people works. And medication for mental problems, emotional problems work. And those things are helpful for people when they need them and when they're prescribed, and it's a doctor who's doing it. Doctors can mess up, but don't go get your Ritalin from the meth drug dealer. It's not the same thing. So if you want to get an addict to go to rehab, you have to keep trying. That's all. That's the simple thing I'm going to say in this video, is you have to keep trying. An addict's life is ebbs and flows. There's highs and lows. The degree of addiction and how it affects someone mentally affects how much they want help. They can want help in the morning, not want it in the afternoon, want it in the midday, want it after they eat. When an addict does something positive, they're more open to a conversation. It's something simple that you can maybe address. If they know they have the drugs, if they know they're going to be able to get high, you may have a conversation with them. It's a small window, but those little conversations can be the seeds of greater conversations down the road. If they need to get into rehab because you know that they're a mess, get an interventionist. Interventions can cost money, but interventions can also help you out way more than what you imagine. An interventionist can be someone that's not a family member, a stranger, and sometimes strangers get a little bit more headway in talking to someone that's not known to them. An addict who knows you and knows you want him to be healthy knows you're going to sing that same song to him eventually, and that's when they bounce. That's when they're gone. The reasons that they stay around you, though, could be many, many, many reasons. If you love them and you're lucky enough to keep talking to them, and if you can take the misery that comes from them and that's because of them, then it's something that you can do a better job for yourself too, to take less of. You can help them longer. You can help them more by staying happy in your own life. If the loved one makes you miserable, take care of yourself so that you're stronger for them down the road. The ebbs and flow of wanting to be sober, seek help, or just be a hardcore drive it, run yourself into a wall addict, they can come at the most surprising times. It's that ebb of not wanting. It's that ebb of wanting to be sober, of not wanting to get high. It's that moment, that lull, that is a gold opportunity. And it can come, but it's difficult sometimes to get them where they need to go. Drug addicts are forced all the time. You can force them. You can talk strong to them. You can talk firm to them. You can tell them you love them and get mad at them. They need to know how you feel, but they need to not feel judged by you. Being judged an addict judges themselves extraordinarily hard. They judge themselves because they know that they're screwing up and they just can't help it. And then and it's true, that sense of I can't help it is so powerful when you are in the middle of your active addiction, when you're getting high every day, when you're doing it and you know tomorrow's going to be the same. And you do it because you want to, or you do it because you need to, or you find a reason because you have to. The addict that doesn't want to get high is still the addict that can get high and will get high and will try to lie to themselves that they're going to stay sober. But the lie, though, is good. The lie is something that they lied to yourself that you want to get sober, because that lie can turn into the truth eventually. You can do dumb shit during the lying to yourself, don't want to get sober, like actually call for help, like call a counselor, call a program, go visit one. Those little things help. But if you throw out help and it's real cursory, it's like, it's something, but it's not really help. Help is something that you do when you get involved and you're deep into a person's life where you take the steps. I've been the person that's taken steps where I've walked an addict into the doors of a rehab or detox. I've sat with them while they cried. I've waited for them to get their last high. I've sat in the car for hours waiting for them to come out. I've been the one who's had to get them drugs so that they wouldn't run away when they were trying to get into a program. When that day, a program can sometimes be a difficult thing for them to get into. And it's a difficult thing to get into because they can call, and the thing that happens a lot of times is that there's no beds available, a bed not available. That means that they can't go in right away. And if they can't go in right away, that means they got to wait. And if they got to wait, they can change their mind. And unfortunately, that's the reality of it. If you're someone who can stay committed to checking on them and making sure their mind is in the right place and see them physically, phone calls are okay, but to see them physically, take them a meal, right? See if they're on track. They can stay focused to a degree on what it is that they want when they really want it, but also too when they know that somebody is there who's going to push them a little bit, because people can be pushed and people can respond to being pushed. Sometimes they feel alone and they have no one to turn to. No one is going to help them and they can't do it by themselves. But suddenly they find someone or someone draws their attention and they're like, come on, man, we can do something. We can do something. And the addict may not be ready for rehab, so to speak, but because that person is holding them up and driving that bus towards recovery, you're the person that's giving them the legs to walk in that direction. And that's something that an addict who's not ready to go needs. Sometimes that's all they need. You never know what kind of help and when the help will work. The thing is to make sure that the help that you give is help that you know to a degree. Sometimes you can go in blind and just do stuff that you're not real comfortable with. But there's people that you'll run into all the time. You go into an office, you go into a program. There's people that help all the time. Even talking to other addicts. Other addicts can be a great source of information for wanting someone to get help. Because other addicts a lot of times will be helpful to you if they're talking normal. They can make a sentence. Right? What you can do if you're ignorant as to what's the process, how to get into. Just don't get high with the addict and create another problem about you being someone who has a drug problem. Don't use drugs with an addict. That's a killer for being someone that's going to be real helpful to them in the long term. You get high with a fellow addict, then you're a fellow addict that may be able to help them. But if you're a stranger gets high with them and you try to help them, you're done pretty much as being able to come back and help them, unless you're somebody who really tries hard. I mean, there's no one answer that fits all, but the main thing is try. Make sure you try. Try. Don't kill yourself over trying, right? You'll get hope when you offer help. And that sense of hope is really, really powerful, especially if you see it in the face of the addict. An addict may cry in front of you because they're like, I can't believe somebody cares about me. Somebody wants to help me. It can be that way, and it is that way a lot of times. There's a lot of tears. There's a lot of misery. There's a lot of frustration in the addict. There's a lot of loss, of sadness, and just a sense of not, well, desperation is there, but a sense of just hopelessness. Hope is the only thing really that goes last, is true, before an addict succumbs to their addiction so bad that they die. There's no hope for them, and they feel it. They don't believe that they can get sober. And you don't have to believe that you could get sober or you're going to stay sober. You just have to try. If you're the addict, try a little bit. Have a meal with somebody who's not getting high. That's trying. That's not just getting a meal. If the person talks to you about, anything related not to drugs, that's a plus. That's a plus. That's outside of your addict existence. And anything like that is a plus that helps to get you one step forward into leaving drugs forever and behind. And for the person that wants to get them into rehab, well, rehab is there and rehab's down the road, and there's a lot of people that can help. There's a lot of doors that you can walk through, but there's a lot of doors too that you don't know how to walk through. If you want to learn something about how to get someone into rehab, then call a rehab, right? You can watch YouTube videos, but calling the rehab is you'll get a flavor of what it is to call the front desk, or to call the information, or to just ask information. People are helpful in the recovery community. They want to help. They do, and they try. They do. Addicts will bitch and moan why they couldn't stay in a detox. They didn't do it right. Okay, well, that's what they do all the time. Some may provide less quality of service, but it's like they're there to help. Maybe they got a job, but they're still there to help. It's difficult to help people, especially addicts that are like fresh flying off the street on their cloud of like, I just did my last high and I'm not sure about this. And addicts can be forced. It's true. Addicts get arrested. A blessing can sometimes be an addict getting arrested. But a blessing is something, too, that an addict is like, you don't want to get arrested. Don't get arrested. If you can avoid getting arrested, you don't need a record is what you don't need. Avoid it at all costs. Family member, avoid it at all costs. That's not the number one solution for them to help them. It's a solution in absolute times of perhaps desperation and but if they get arrested for whatever reason, it's usually paraphernalia or possession. Addicts don't have a lot of money, so hopefully it's a misdemeanor. But in some places, paraphernalia can be a felony. Paraphernalia can, it can be a pain in the ass if you miss your court dates and you got warrants in, and then you're running around, right? But if you're the addict who missed your court dates and you're running around hiding from the cops, they ain't chasing you. They're probably not chasing you. They're just waiting for you to come back. Probably every now and then, you might hear something, or or you won't hear anything, man. If you get stopped by the cops and you give a false name, that's a charge. That's a felony. That's a felony charge, and they figure it out. They'll take you and then add it to the charge for absconding, the warrant that already exists for you. You don't need that. No, you don't need that at all. You don't need a record. Felony is a pain in the ass. Felony is makes life difficult. But doesn't make it impossible. When you have felony, it's a lesson you learn. It's a lesson you have. It's a lesson you carry for the rest of your life. The rest of your life is what you have to carry it with. If you can't get your record expunged for some reason, you can. That stuff can happen. So the addict who wants to go into rehab is the addict who's a joy to have to watch him go through that process and to see him in that process, and to be lucky enough to see an addict who goes in, mess, comes back out 30, 60, 90 days, different looking person, sticks with it forever. Good God, that's an amazing journey for one person to be able to experience. It's not an easy thing to see because it doesn't happen. It does happen, and it can happen, so we'll just leave it at that. So to all the addicts and the people that help them, good luck to you, and God bless you for being you and doing what you do to help and to want to get help. Amen.